Happy Friday, BookTube! I, of course, have my ritual tea. Today we're going with Earl Grey, and I am on the first day of a long weekend, which of course means reading and more reading and more reading. As usual in my Friday reads, I'm going to start off by telling you what I've read in the past week. Perhaps the pinnacle of my reading achievement yesterday was finally finishing The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich on Audible. I had an audiobook of that. It took me literally a month. I got it the day I got my credit in February, so on February 27th, and I finished it on, well, the 29th, so yesterday, so just over a month it took me to get through that, and I really enjoyed it. It's really long. I think in paperback format it's like 1,600 plus pages. It's just a massive work of history, but it's quite interesting, quite educational too, and listening to it on audiobook made it easier to digest. I had it at about 1.75 times the speed, sometimes 2 times the speed, depending on how my ears were processing that day. But I'm glad I read it. It's something that I would perhaps read again a few years from now. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. Like, I learned about the Second World War in my high school history classes, of course. I've read from the Canadian and the British perspective, but it was very interesting to get kind of a play-by-play of key events from the German perspective. So yes, I finished that, and last weekend I went for a couple of children's books I picked up. I read Roald Dahl's The Witches. My grade 4 teacher read this to my class, and I don't think I'd actually read it on my own since then, so it was fun to revisit. Then I discovered something really fun called The Adventures of Paddy the Beaver, the Bedtime Storybooks collection by Thornton W. Burgess. So this is a really cute story about a beaver by the name of Paddy who moves into a forest near some farmland, and he sets to work building his dam. The other creatures in the forest, of course, are quite curious. They've never seen a beaver before. They've never seen a dam built. And it's just this cute children's story about their interactions and about working together, really. And a little bit of research told me that there are other books by this author, The Adventures of So-and-so, about other animals. We've got this cute paper in here, and someone actually has their name in it. This particular edition was published in Toronto by Maclean and Stewart Limited, which is actually a major publisher here in Canada. And I don't think there was a publication date in this edition. Oh, there is. This one was published in 1943, but I believe this dates from about 1913 or possibly earlier. I'm forgetting now. But anyway, that was a fun read. Then on Monday and Tuesday, I read Margaret Drabble's novel, The Millstone. Set in the 1960s, Rosamond, who doesn't seem that into sex, it's almost as though she's afraid of it. Perhaps she's asexual. She's been avoiding it all her life, and then suddenly she finds herself sleeping with a man for the first time, and we get a little bit of her process, and she doesn't seem to intend to sleep with him, but she does enjoy it, and the result is that shortly after he leaves, she finds out she's pregnant. And the premise is that, having failed to decide not to have it, she has this baby in the 1960s, and she contemplates what it means to be an unwed mother, what it means to be kind of wealthy thanks to her parents who let her stay in their luxury apartment, their luxury condo, rent-free, and the privilege she has because of that. It's not anything earth-shattering, but it is very interesting, and I'm sure especially for the time when it was published, it was quite a groundbreaking novel that pushed boundaries. Maybe groundbreaking isn't the right word, but I'm sure it certainly pushed boundaries. Then yesterday on my lunch break I started reading a collection of short stories called Darkness. The author is Indian American. She was born in India, spent many years of her life in the United States, but Canada, we sometimes claim her as one of our own too, because she spent a number of years living in Toronto and Montreal, and some of her stories are even set in Canada, and she wrote while she was in Canada, so the Canadian literary scene had an influence on her, and she has had an influence on Canadian literature. That's the funny thing about Canadian literature. Sometimes we grasp at whoever we can link to our literary scene. Yeah, so these are quite interesting. They're mainly about the immigrant experience in North America. I'll be finishing these up later today. I'm almost done. I've got a paper napkin as a bookmark. On to what I intend to read over this long weekend. I think I'm finally going to start into the second volume of Proust's In Search of Lost Time, Volume 2, Within a Budding Grove. I've been putting this off, and I actually have this behind me as well. One of my coworkers very kindly brought me the French version of it, which I don't think I'm capable of reading, but perhaps I can look at a few bits of this here and there and see what I can understand. I don't think I'm capable of really comparing, but it was a nice gesture all the same. In French, the title is À l'ombre des jeunes filles en fleurs, with a preface by Pierre Louis. Yeah, my French really sucks. So, Proust is on the menu for today and this weekend. I'm going to dip into a few more short stories from the Penguin Book of Canadian Short Stories that I've been working my way through slowly. I'm probably going to dive into Evening Snow Will Bring Such Peace by David Adams Richardson. Let's see if there's a synopsis I can read for you. Evening Snow Will Bring Such Peace is a novel of compassion, betrayal, and fierce loyalties. It is set in the fictional mill town in northern New Brunswick that Richard so beautifully evoked in his previous novel. It is now 1979, and Cindy and Ivan Bastarish have been married for only 20 months. There is a disagreement over a loan and rumor of violence in the ensuing quarrel. Their subsequent separation throws into relief the frustrated lives of the people around them, whose concern and interventions reveal the sometimes cruel truth that lies at the root of good intention. Among the brilliantly portrayed characters, there is Ivan's father, Anthony, a man whose self-delusions and misguided efforts to set things right lead to ultimate tragedy. It is Cindy's friend Ruby, privileged and spoiled, who takes it upon herself to look after Cindy, and Cindy, whose inherent grace and self-sufficiency most do not see. There is Ivan, who gradually becomes the victim of a misunderstanding and betrayal, leading to the novel's powerful conclusion. Disturbing at times, darkly humorous, brutal, and tender-hearted. This is the second book in a trilogy which began with Nights Below Station Street. Yeah, so it's the second book in a trilogy, and I bought it secondhand, so I didn't know that when I bought it. But I'm just going to say screw it and read the second book in the trilogy first, because I'm sure it really won't matter too much, at least it shouldn't. And I might dip into this one as well. This is Lady Chatterley's Latterly by Walter O'Hearn. Vintage hardcover here with a yellowing dust jacket. And this one, which I of course bought secondhand, has a synopsis as well. Whatever happened to Constance Chatterley when she finally married Mellors the gamekeeper? Walter O'Hearns reveals for the first time in print this true story of Lady Chatterley latterly. She tells how Mellors dropped his Derbyshire dialect, took to wearing neatly brushed town clothes and to having high tea. Constance, after seeing her son Wilberforce off to commercial college, took up theosophy and ended by wheeling Mellors, completely crippled with arthritis, around their nursing home. The picture of English respectability. From the pages of the Montreal Star comes this and other sketches from Walter O'Hearn's columns. His satirical pen punctures many balloons. The Montreal poets and Canadian writers in general, the separatist movement, the separatist movement and Canadian politics, the Commonwealth, and the Canada Council. In O'Hearn's gallery of political portraits, our national heroes appear in comical dress. Pearson as Nanky Poo of the Mikado, Diefenbaker in a James Bond thriller. Oh, Diefenbaker in a James Bond thriller, that would be funny. James Coyne as the lonesome cowboy of Parliament Hill. In a more genial mood, O'Hearn reminisces about his childhood in the Maritimes and his eccentric Irish ancestors. In those days, Nova Scotia politics were practiced with a flourish by little Lord Fauntleroy Finn, Walter O'Hearn's godfather. Mr. O'Hearn's humour often prickles and sometimes soothes. His wit is as wide as his views of contemporary Canadiana. So once again, I read something similar, a collection of essays last week of articles that had been published in newspapers, and so I think this is sort of the same thing. In this case, it appears that it will be mostly satire, which should be fun. And let me check the publication date for you. Yeah, so this was published in '63, also by Maclean Stewart. Great Canadian publisher there. Yeah, so that is what I'm up to in my reading this weekend. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, a little bit tired. So I'm hoping I don't just fade out and end up watching Netflix, because I really would like to read quite a bit and take the opportunity that I have to dig into the books that I have sitting around on my shelves and on my floor and everywhere.